In the underworld of Chicago, silence is usually the most expensive commodity. But sometimes it's the words you do say that sign your death warrant. When Dominic Moretti, the most feared capo in the city, walked into a rundown diner at 2 a.m., he was looking for a distraction, not a challenge. He cracked a joke, a simple, arrogant test of power. He expected fear. He expected submission. What he got was a 7-word answer that froze the blood in his veins and changed the entire hierarchy of the city. Who was this waitress? Why did she know his darkest secret? And why, instead of killing her, did he suddenly realize he would burn the city down to save her? This is the story of the waitress and the wolf. Buckle up. The neon sign above Sal's 24-hour Eats flickered with a dying buzz, casting an intermittent, sickly red glow onto the wet pavement of 4th Street. It was raining in Chicago, a cold, biting rain that smelled of rusted metal and exhaust fumes. Inside the diner was a graveyard of empty booths and the smell of stale fryer grease. Sarah Jenkins wiped the counter for the 100th time that night. Her movements were mechanical. Rag down, circular motion, lift, repeat. Her uniform, a pale blue that had faded to grey, hung loosely on her frame. She had dark circles under her eyes that no amount of drugstore concealer could hide, and her chestnut hair was pulled back in a messy bun that screamed exhaustion. At 2:13 a.m., the bell above the door chimed. It wasn't the soft tinkle of a customer. It was a warning. The wind howled as the door opened, and 3 men stepped inside. The air in the diner instantly shifted. The humidity was replaced by the scent of expensive cologne, cigar smoke, and gun oil. In the center stood Dominic Moretti. Even if you didn't read the papers, you knew who he was. He wore a tailored charcoal suit that cost more than the diner's annual lease. His face was sharp, angular, and handsome in a way that suggested cruelty rather than kindness. He had eyes like polished obsidian, dark, reflective, and utterly devoid of warmth. Flanking him were his usual shadows, Anthony the Ox Russo, a man whose neck was wider than his head, and sleek, silent Benny. Sarah didn't look up immediately. She kept wiping the counter. Sit anywhere. Kitchen closes in 10. Dominic paused. He wasn't used to being ignored. He walked to the counter, his leather shoes making no sound on the sticky linoleum, and sat on a stool directly in front of her. He placed a heavy gold watch on the counter and tapped the glass face. "Kitchen closes when I say it closes, sweetheart," Dominic said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the countertop. Sarah finally stopped wiping. She looked up, meeting his gaze. She didn't flinch. She didn't tremble. She just looked. Tired. "Coffee?" she asked, her voice flat. "Black, and make it quick. I have a city to run." She turned, poured a mug of the sludge that had been sitting in the pot since midnight, and set it down in front of him. Dominic took a sip and immediately grimaced, setting the mug down with a sharp clack. He leaned in, a shark-like grin spreading across his face. This was his favorite game, toying with civilians, making them sweat. "Jesus!" Dominic laughed, looking at Anthony. "You know, sweetheart, I ordered coffee, not battery acid. If I drink the rest of this, does it come with a free funeral service?" Anthony chuckled darkly. Benny smirked. They waited for the apology. They waited for the stammering fear. Sarah didn't blink. She leaned over the counter, invading his personal space just an inch. Her eyes, a striking, piercing green, locked onto his. "Only if you prepay the tip, Mr. Moretti," she said softly, her voice steady as a surgeon's hand. "Funerals are expensive, but cleaning your blood off my floor, that costs extra." The diner went deathly silent. The smile vanished from Dominic's face. Anthony's hand went inside his jacket. Benny stiffened. Dominic stared at her. It wasn't just the insult. It was the fact that she used his name, not Sir, not Mr., but Moretti. And she spoke about his blood as if she had seen it before. "You know who I am," Dominic said, his voice dropping to a whisper. It wasn't a question. "I know you tip 10% and complain about the heat," Sarah lied, turning back to the coffee pot. "Do you want a fresh pot or not?" Dominic sat back, studying her. He had expected a mouse. He had found a viper. "Leave the pot," Dominic said, never taking his eyes off her spine. "And keep the change." He threw a $100 bill on the counter. It landed in a puddle of coffee. Sarah didn't touch the money. She just went back to wiping the counter. But Dominic noticed something as he walked away. Her hands were steady, but her breathing was controlled. Specifically controlled, like someone trying to lower their heart rate to pass a polygraph. "Boss," Anthony grunted as they got into the armored SUV waiting outside. "You want me to torch the place?" Dominic looked back at the flickering neon sign. "No, I want you to find out who she is. Real name, past addresses, everything. She's just a waitress, boss." "A waitress who isn't afraid of death is never just a waitress, Anthony. She's a loose end. And I want to know where the string leads." The following night, the rain had turned to a dense fog that rolled off Lake Michigan, swallowing the Chicago skyline. Inside the penthouse office of the Moretti crime family, the mood was tense. Dominic sat behind a mahogany desk that had belonged to his father, and his father's father before him. He was nursing a glass of scotch, staring at a single file folder lying open on the leather blotter. "You're telling me," Dominic said, his voice dangerously calm, "that she doesn't exist?" Ray Miller, a detective on the Moretti payroll, wiped sweat from his receding hairline. He looked nervous. He hated bringing bad news to Dominic. "I ran her prints off the coffee cup you snagged, Dom. I ran facial rec. I ran the social security number she gave the diner owner. Nothing matches. The SSN belongs to a guy who died in Detroit in 1998. The name Sarah Jenkins is a ghost. No birth certificate, no credit history prior to 6 months ago." Dominic swirled the amber liquid in his glass. "So, she drops into Chicago 6 months ago, gets a job at a dive on the edge of my territory, and knows exactly who I am." "She could be feds," Ray suggested. "Undercover?" Dominic shook his head. "No. Feds try to blend in. They act scared when they're supposed to be scared. She challenged me. That's personal. Or it's professional in a way the feds aren't capable of." Dominic stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. The city lights blurred in the fog. He couldn't get her eyes out of his head. Those green eyes. They looked haunted. Yes, but beneath the exhaustion was a cold, hard intelligence. "Is she at the diner tonight?" Dominic asked. "Shift started at 10 p.m., Ray confirmed. "Get the car. And Ray?" "Yeah, Dom? Bring the heavy kit. I have a feeling tonight isn't going to be about coffee." Back at Sal's diner, Sarah was feeling the pressure. She knew she had slipped up. She had let the mask slip for 5 seconds, provoked by Moretti's arrogance. It was a stupid mistake. "You should run," her instinct screamed. "Pack the bag, go to St. Louis, change your hair." But she couldn't. Not yet. She was so close to finding the ledger that proved who actually killed her father. She knew it was hidden somewhere in this district, moved through the very supply trucks that delivered produce to this diner. She went to the back alley to toss a bag of trash into the dumpster. The cold air hit her face, waking her up. As she turned to go back inside, a hand clamped over her mouth. She didn't scream. Years of training kicked in. She dropped her center of gravity, drove her elbow back into the attacker's ribs and twisted. The man grunted, losing his grip. Sarah spun around, pulling a small switchblade from her apron pocket. Standing there wasn't Dominic Moretti. It was a man she recognized from the shadows of her past. A man with a scar running through his left eyebrow. "Hello, Isabella," the man hissed, smiling through the pain in his ribs. Sarah's blood ran cold. She hadn't heard that name in 3 years, not since the night her family's house burned down. "Kruger," she whispered. "How did you find me? You got sloppy, kid. You made a scene with the new King of Chicago. People talk. When I heard about a waitress with a mouth on her at Sal's, I figured it had to be the Rossi brat." Kruger pulled a silenced pistol from his coat. "Your father stole $5 million from the cartel before he died. We know you know where it is." "I don't have the money," Sarah said, backing up toward the brick wall. "Then you're useless." Kruger raised the gun. Bang! The shot was deafening in the narrow alley. Sarah flinched, expecting the impact, expecting the darkness, but she wasn't the one falling. Kruger's eyes went wide. A small red bloom appeared in the center of his chest. He crumpled to the wet asphalt, revealing the silhouette standing behind him at the mouth of the alley. Dominic Moretti stood there, a smoking revolver in his hand. The smoke swirled around him like a dark halo. He stepped over Kruger's body, kicking the gun away from the dead man's hand, and looked at Sarah. "Isabella?" Dominic asked, his voice tight. "That's a pretty name. Much better than Sarah." Sarah didn't lower her knife. She was trembling now, the adrenaline dumping into her system. "You followed me." "Good thing I did," Dominic said, holstering his weapon. He looked at the dead hitman. "Cartel heavy. Why is the Mexican cartel interested in a diner waitress?" "Go to hell, Moretti," she spat. Dominic laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "We're already there, sweetheart. Look around." He stepped closer, ignoring the knife she brandished. "You have 2 choices. 1, you stay here, talk to the cops when they show up in 3 minutes, and try to explain why a dead cartel hitter is in your alley. 2, you get in my car, and you tell me why you nearly got your head blown off on my turf." Sirens began to wail in the distance, getting louder. Sarah looked at the dead man. She looked at Dominic. She realized her cover wasn't just blown, it was incinerated. "I drive," she said. Dominic smirked. "Not a chance. Get in the passenger seat." The ride to the safe house was silent. Dominic drove the Maserati with one hand, his eyes constantly checking the mirrors. Sarah sat stiffly in the passenger seat, the knife now folded away, but her hand never left her pocket. They didn't go to his penthouse. Too obvious. He took her to a safe house in the industrial district, a converted loft above a textile factory that had been closed for years. Inside, the space was sparse. Brick walls, leather furniture, a heavy steel door with 3 locks. Dominic locked them all. He poured 2 drinks. He slid one across the granite island to her. "Drink. It helps with the shakes." Sarah ignored the glass. "I don't shake. Everyone shakes after their first close call, Isabella. It's biology." "It wasn't my first," she said quietly. Dominic paused. He looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the way she stood, weight distributed evenly on both feet. He saw the scar on her wrist, partially hidden by her watch. "Who was your father?" Dominic asked. "Does it matter? He's dead." "It matters because a cartel hitter just tried to execute you on my territory. That makes it my business. If you're bringing a war to my doorstep, I need to know why." Sarah took a deep breath. She knew she had no leverage. "My name is Isabella Rossi." Dominic froze. The glass stopped halfway to his mouth. "Rossi," Dominic whispered. "As in Carlo Rossi. He was the Don of the West Side before your family took over," Sarah said, her voice gaining strength. before your father had him killed. The tension in the room skyrocketed. The history between the Morettis and the Rossis was written in blood. A decade ago, a turf war had decimated both families. The Morettis won. The Rossis were supposed to be extinct. Carlo didn't have a daughter, Dominic said, his eyes narrowing. He had 2 sons. Both died in the shootout of 16. He had a mistress, Sarah corrected, and a daughter he kept hidden to protect her from people like you. I was in med school in Boston when the war happened. By the time I came back, my father was dead, my brothers were buried, and your father was sitting on his throne. Dominic set his glass down. If you're Carlo's daughter, you're heir to the West Side claim. You're royalty in this city. I'm a waitress, she said bitterly, or I was until tonight. Why come back? Dominic moved around the island, closing the distance between them. Why risk it? You were out. You were safe. Because your father didn't just kill mine, Sarah said, looking up at him, her eyes burning with hate. He framed him. He said my father stole the family pension fund, $5 million. It ruined his name. It left my mother destitute. She died in a charity ward last year. She poked a finger into Dominic's chest. I came back to find the money, to prove he didn't steal it, to clear his name. Dominic grabbed her hand, stopping her. His touch was firm, but electric. Isabella, he said, his voice low. My father didn't kill Carlo. Sarah pulled her hand away. Liar. My father gave the order, Dominic admitted. But he didn't pull the trigger, and he didn't take the money. We never found the $5 million. We thought Carlo hid it. He didn't, Sarah insisted. I found his journals. He was being set up by someone on the inside, someone who played both sides. Dominic's mind raced. If the money was missing, and the Rossis didn't have it, and the Morettis didn't have it. The third man, Dominic muttered. What? There was a rumor, Dominic said, pacing the room. A third player during the war. Someone who was feeding information to both families, escalating the conflict so we'd kill each other off. We never found out who it was. The man in the alley, Sarah said suddenly. Kruger. He asked about the money. He said, we know you know where it is. If the cartel is looking for it, they didn't take it either. Dominic stopped pacing. He looked at Sarah. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, or perhaps something more. If we find that money, Dominic said, we find the traitor, the person who actually destroyed your family, and, he hesitated, the person who is currently stealing from mine. We? Sarah scoffed. There is no we. You're a Moretti. I'm a Rossi. We're oil and water. Right now, Dominic said, stepping close enough that she could smell the scotch and sandalwood on him. We are 2 targets on the same hit list. Kruger wasn't working alone. If he found you, others are coming. You can hate me later, Isabella. But tonight, you need me. Sarah looked at the door, then back at Dominic. She hated that he was right. She hated that he was handsome. She hated that when he shot Kruger, she felt safe for the first time in years. Fine, she whispered. But if you double-cross me, Moretti, I will use this knife. Dominic smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. I'd be disappointed if you didn't. Suddenly, the lights in the safe house cut out. Darkness swallowed them. Get down! Dominic roared. A hail of bullets shattered the large industrial windows, glass raining down on them like diamonds. Dominic tackled Sarah, covering her body with his, as the room was torn apart by automatic fire. They were pinned down, and this time it wasn't just a hitman. It was an army. The floor of the loft disintegrated under the barrage of gunfire. Bullets chewed through the drywall, sending plumes of white dust into the air, mixing with the darkness. Move! Dominic yelled, grabbing Sarah's arm. He didn't run for the door. That was a death trap. Instead, he dragged her toward the kitchen island. He kicked aside a heavy rubber mat, revealing a flush-mounted steel handle in the floor. "A trap door!" Sarah screamed over the noise of shattering glass. "Prohibition era," Dominic grunted, hauling the heavy iron door open. "Used to be a bootlegger's drop. Go!" He shoved her down into the darkness just as the front door of the loft was blown off its hinges. Sarah tumbled down a wooden chute, landing hard on a pile of old canvas sacks in the factory basement below. Dominic jumped after her, landing with a heavy thud and a sharp grunt of pain. Above them, flashlights swept the dusty loft. Boots crunched on glass. "Clear the room! Find them!" a voice bellowed from upstairs. "We have 30 seconds, Dominic hissed, grabbing her hand again. His grip was wet. They sprinted through the dark, abandoned textile factory. Dominic knew the layout by heart. This building had been in his family for 80 years. He navigated them through a maze of rusted looms and conveyor belts until they burst out a side door into a hidden loading bay. A nondescript black Ford sedan sat there, covered in a tarp. Dominic ripped the tarp off. "Get in!" Sarah scrambled into the passenger seat. Dominic slid behind the wheel, his movements jerky. He keyed the ignition, and the engine roared to life. He slammed the car into reverse, tires screeching, and smashed through the chain-link fence, fishtailing onto the wet street. As they sped away, merging onto the highway and leaving the chaos behind, the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a cold reality. Sarah looked over at Dominic. His face was pale, illuminated by the passing streetlights. His left hand was gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white, but his right arm hung uselessly at his side. "You're hit," she said, her voice trembling. "Just a scratch," Dominic grit out, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. "Pull over," Sarah demanded. "No. We need distance. They'll be watching the hospitals. They'll be watching the bridges." "Dominic, look at your shirt!" His charcoal suit jacket was soaked through with a dark, spreading stain. The blood was dripping down onto the leather seat. "I have a place," he mumbled, his speech starting to slur slightly. "North. Cabin near the border. No one knows about it. Not even Anthony. You're going to bleed out before we get to the border if you don't let me help you," Sarah snapped. She unbuckled her seatbelt and leaned over, grabbing the steering wheel with one hand to steady it. "Keep your foot on the gas. I need to apply pressure." She ripped the scarf from her neck and jammed it against his shoulder. Dominic let out a guttural roar of pain, but didn't let go of the wheel. "Talk to me," Sarah ordered, pressing harder against the wound. "Stay awake, Moretti. Don't you dare die on me now." You have a hell of a bedside manner, Isabella," he wheezed, a faint smirk touching his lips. "I was top of my class in trauma surgery before my life imploded," she said, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. "Now drive." For 2 hours they drove into the blackness of the Illinois countryside. The city lights faded, replaced by towering pines and empty roads. Dominic's breathing grew shallow. The invincible Mafia Don was fading, revealing the mortal man beneath. Finally, he turned off the main road onto a gravel track. The car bounced and skidded, coming to a halt in front of a small, A-frame cabin hidden deep in the woods. "We're here," Dominic whispered. He killed the engine. Then he slumped forward against the steering wheel, unconscious. Getting him inside was a nightmare. Dominic was 6'3" of solid muscle, and dead weight is heavy. Sarah had to drag him, inch by inch, through the snow that had started to fall, finally hauling him onto the rug in front of the cold fireplace. She didn't panic. Panic was a luxury she couldn't afford. She went into doctor mode. She raided the cabin's bathroom and kitchen. She found a bottle of high-proof vodka, a sewing kit, clean towels and a lighter. She knelt beside him and cut away his expensive suit jacket and shirt. The wound was ugly, a through-and-through shot to the deltoid. It had missed the artery by millimeters, but it was ragged and bleeding freely. "Okay, Dominic," she whispered to his unconscious form. "This is going to hurt." She poured the vodka over the wound to disinfect it. Dominic's body jerked violently, his eyes flying open. He gasped, his hand instinctively reaching for her throat, but he stopped himself just before contact. "Easy," Sarah said, pinning his good shoulder down. "I'm cleaning it." Dominic fell back, breathing hard through his nose. His eyes were glassy. "Did we make it?" "We made it. Now hold still. I have to stitch this, and I don't have lidocaine." Dominic stared at the ceiling beams. He nodded once. "Do it." Sarah heated the needle with the lighter. For the next 20 minutes, the only sounds in the cabin were the crackling of the fire she had managed to start and the sharp intakes of breath from Dominic as she sewed his flesh back together. He didn't scream. He didn't beg. He just endured it with a terrifying resolve. When she tied the final knot and bandaged him, she sat back, exhausted, her hands covered in his blood. Dominic sat up slowly, testing the movement. He looked at the bandage, then at her. "You saved my life," he said quietly. "I need you alive," she deflected, walking to the sink to wash her hands. "You're my only ticket out of this mess." "Is that the only reason?" Sarah paused. She looked at him in the reflection of the dark window. He was shirtless, firelight dancing on the tattoos that covered his chest, images of saints and sinners, a map of his life. "You took a bullet for me," she said, turning around. "Why?" "Because," Dominic said, standing up on shaky legs. He walked over to her. "You didn't run. In the alley in the loft. You didn't run. In my world, everyone runs. Or they bow." He reached out, his hand brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. His thumb grazed her cheekbone. The tension in the room shifted from survival to something thicker, hotter. "You're not a waitress, Isabella," he murmured. "And you're not just a Rossi. You're a force of nature." Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. She should pull away. He was the enemy. He was the wolf. But looking into his obsidian eyes, she didn't see a monster. She saw a man who was just as lonely and hunted as she was. "We need to look at the journals," she said, her voice barely a whisper, breaking the spell. Dominic sighed, stepping back. He respected the boundary, though his eyes lingered on her lips. "Right. The journals." Sarah retrieved the waterproof bag she had kept strapped to her body under her uniform. She pulled out a tattered leather notebook, her father's ledger. They sat by the fire, shoulder to shoulder. Dominic poured them both a glass of the remaining vodka. "Here," Sarah pointed to an entry dated 3 years ago. "Meeting with the Shadow. He promises the Morettis will fall if I move the funds to the offshore account he provided. He says he speaks for the commission." "The Shadow," Dominic mused. "Melodramatic." "Look at the date," Sarah said. "October 14th. Dominic frowned. "October 14th. That was the day of my father's birthday gala. Everyone was there. All the captains. All the lieutenants." "Not everyone," Sarah corrected. "Read the next line." The Shadow arrived late. He smelled of peppermint and sulphur. He said he had to leave his sick wife's bedside to meet me. Dominic froze. The glass in his hand shattered, vodka splashing into the fire, causing a flare-up. "Dominic!" "Peppermint," Dominic whispered, his voice turning into a growl. "And a sick wife. Who is it?" "Uncle Vincent." Dominic spat the name like a curse. "Vincent Moretti, my father's brother. He always sucked on peppermint candies to hide the smell of his cigars. And his wife, Aunt Maria, She had cancer that year. He used her illness as an excuse to miss meetings, to come and go as he pleased. Sarah's eyes widened. Your own uncle? He wanted the crown. Dominic stood up, pacing the small cabin like a caged animal. He was always the second son. He hated my father. And when my father died, he thought he would take over. But the captains chose me. They chose the young blood. So he played us, Sarah realized, horror dawning on her. He convinced my father to steal the money to bankrupt your family, promising him protection. Then he told your father that mine stole it, triggering the war. He wanted us to kill each other so he could step into the vacuum. And he's still doing it, Dominic realized. The cartel hit on you. Vincent must be working with them now. He's trying to tie up the last loose end. You. Dominic looked at Sarah. The anger in his eyes was terrifying, but it wasn't directed at her anymore. He killed my family, Sarah said, tears welling up, and he turned yours into murderers. He's going to pay, Dominic vowed. But we can't just shoot him. He's too connected. If I kill him without proof, the other families will turn on me. I'll start a civil war. We have the proof, Sarah said, tapping the journal. But it's just handwriting. We need the money. We need to find where that offshore account leads. I know a guy, Dominic said. A forensic accountant. But he's in the city. We have to go back. We're going back to the slaughterhouse, Sarah said. No. Dominic turned to her, his face hard. We're going back to take the butcher's knife away. The drive back to Chicago the next morning was tense. The sky was a bruised purple, heavy with snow. They had swapped the license plates on the Ford with a rusted pickup truck parked near the cabin to avoid detection. Dominic was feverish, his wound throbbing, but he refused to stop. We go to the accountant first, Dominic outlined the plan. He verifies the account number in your dad's journal. He traces the IP. Once we link that account to Vincent, I call a meeting of the commission. I put a bullet in his head in front of everyone. And what happens to me? Sarah asked. Dominic glanced at her. You get the $5 million. You get your life back. You go to Boston, finish med school, and forget you ever met me. Sarah looked out the window. Is that what you want? It's what's safe, Dominic said, his grip tightening on the wheel. You don't belong in this life, Isabella. You're a healer. I'm a breaker. Maybe I don't want to be safe, she whispered, too low for him to hear. They reached the city limits at noon. Dominic navigated the back streets, avoiding the main thoroughfares where his uncle's men, or the police, would be watching. They pulled into the underground parking garage of a high-rise in the financial district. Stay in the car, Dominic ordered, checking the clip of his pistol. No, Sarah said, opening her door. It's my father's money. I'm coming. Dominic glared at her, then sighed. Stubborn. You really are a Rossi. They took the service elevator up to the 40th floor. The office was quiet. Too quiet? Dominic drew his gun. He pushed the door to the accountant's office open. The office was tossed. Files were scattered everywhere. And in the center of the room, the accountant, a small man named Saul, was zip-tied to his chair, battered and bloody. Standing over him was Anthony the Ox. Dominic lowered his gun slightly, confused. Anthony! Anthony spun around, startled. He looked at Dominic, then at the gun in his hand. Boss? Anthony's voice was shaky. Thank God. Everyone thinks you're dead. Vincent said, Step away from him, Anthony, Dominic commanded. Vincent said you turned traitor, Anthony blurted out. He said you ran off with the Rossi girl and the money. He put a bounty on your head, Dom. $5 million. Every hitter in the city is looking for you. Vincent is the traitor, Anthony. Dominic stepped forward. He set this whole thing up. He killed the Rossis. He tried to kill me." Anthony looked torn. He looked at Dominic, the man he had served for years, and then he looked at the phone on the desk. I called him, Dom. When I found Saul, I told him I found the leak." Dominic's eyes went wide. "You called Vincent? I thought I was helping." Ding! The elevator doors behind them chimed. "Ambush!" Dominic yelled. He tackled Sarah behind the heavy oak desk, just as the glass walls of the office shattered. Automatic gunfire raked the room. Anthony roared, drawing his weapon to defend his boss, but he was cut down instantly, his body falling backward over the accountant. "Anthony!" Dominic screamed. Men in tactical gear poured out of the elevators. Leading them was an older man in a pristine white suit, leaning on a cane with a silver wolf's head handle. Vincent Moretti. He didn't look like a monster. He looked like a grandfather. He smiled benevolently as his men surrounded the desk. "Come on out, nephew," Vincent called out, his voice smooth like velvet. "And bring the girl. We have a family reunion to attend." Dominic looked at Sarah. He checked his gun. 2 bullets left. He looked at her with an intensity that stopped her heart. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Don't you dare give up," Sarah hissed, clutching her knife. "I'm not giving up," Dominic said softly. "I'm making a deal." Dominic stood up, hands raised. "Hold fire," Vincent ordered. "Let her go," Dominic said, walking out from behind the desk. "Let her walk away. She's nobody. She doesn't know anything." Vincent chuckled, tapping his cane on the floor. "Oh, Dominic, you always had a soft spot for strays, but she's not nobody. She's Isabella Rossi, and she has my money." Vincent signaled to his men. 2 guards rushed forward, grabbing Sarah and dragging her out. She kicked and screamed, but they were too strong. Another guard struck Dominic across the face with the butt of a rifle, sending him to his knees. "Check them," Vincent ordered. A guard patted Sarah down and found the waterproof bag. He handed the journal to Vincent. "Ah," Vincent sighed, flipping through the pages. "The final chapter. Thank you, my dear." He tossed the journal into a metal wastebasket, pulled a gold lighter from his pocket, and dropped it in. The flames caught instantly. "There goes your proof," Vincent smiled. "And now—" He pulled a pistol from his coat. He pointed it not at Dominic, but at Sarah. "No!" Dominic lunged forward, but 2 guards held him back. "You took everything from me, Vincent," Dominic roared. "Kill me! Leave her out of it!" "You see, Dominic," Vincent said, cocking the hammer, "killing you is easy. But breaking you? That takes finesse. I want you to watch the Rossi line end. I want you to know that you failed to save her." Vincent's finger tightened on the trigger. Sarah looked at Dominic. She didn't look at the gun. She looked right at him. "It's okay," she mouthed. Click. The gun didn't fire. Vincent frowned. He racked the slide. A jammed casing flew out. In that split second of distraction, chaos erupted. But it didn't come from Dominic. It came from the window. A black shape swung through the shattered glass on a rappel line, smashing into Vincent and knocking him to the ground. Smoke grenades rolled into the room, filling the space with thick, choking white gas. "Who the hell is that?" Dominic coughed, struggling against his blinded captors. A voice echoed through the smoke, a voice neither of them recognized. Distorted, mechanical, and amplified. "The Shadow sends his regards." The office was no longer a place of business. It was a white void of choking sulfur and confusion. The smoke grenades had turned the luxury high-rise suite into a claustrophobic kill box. Visibility was reduced to inches. The air tasted of burnt magnesium and copper. Dominic Moretti moved on instinct alone. The logical part of his brain, the part that planned shipping routes and negotiated labor contracts, shut down. The primal part took over, Through the swirling white haze, he saw a shadow move, a silhouette of a guard raising a rifle butt to strike. Dominic didn't hesitate. He roared, a sound tearing from his throat that was half pain, half fury. He drove his shoulder into the guard's solar plexus, the impact expelling the air from the man's lungs in a wet wheeze. They hit the floor together, a tangle of limbs and expensive fabric. The guard was strong, but Dominic was desperate. He jammed his forearm against the man's windpipe, ignoring the agony in his own bullet-wounded shoulder, and delivered a savage headbutt. Bone cracked against bone. The guard went limp. Dominic scrambled up, ripping the assault rifle from the unconscious man's grip. He spun in a circle, the weapon raised, his finger hovering over the trigger. "Isabella!" he screamed, the name tearing at his raw throat. The panic of losing her was worse than the gunfire. "Answer me! I'm here, Dominic!" Her voice cut through the smoke, trembling but alive. It came from near the heavy oak filing cabinets. Dominic rushed toward the sound, nearly tripping over the body of another mercenary. He found her backed into a corner. She wasn't cowering. She was standing with her back to the wall, chest heaving, her white waitress uniform smeared with grime and blood. Though, miraculously, it didn't look like her own. In her hand, she gripped a heavy brass letter opener like a dagger. At her feet lay a man, groaning and clutching his thigh where she had evidently stabbed him. "You're all right," Dominic breathed, reaching out to touch her face, checking for injuries. "You're all right." I had to," she stammered, looking at the letter opener in horror before dropping it. "Stay behind me," Dominic commanded, turning back to the center of the room. The smoke began to vent through the shattered floor-to-ceiling windows, sucked out into the cold Chicago wind. As the haze lifted, the carnage was revealed. Vincent's mercenaries were down, incapacitated with surgical precision. Standing in the center of the room, amidst the broken glass and scattered files, was the figure in black. The Shadow. He was reloading dual pistols with a mechanical, rhythmic click-clack. His movements were efficient, devoid of wasted energy. He holstered the weapons and reached up to his tactical helmet. Dominic raised his rifle. "Mask off! Now!" The figure complied. He pulled the helmet off, shaking out his hair. He turned to face them, his expression bored, almost annoyed. Dominic's rifle lowered inches at a time. His jaw went slack. The breath left his body. "Benny?" It was impossible. Benny was the silent shadow who drove the car. Benny was the muscle who barely spoke 2 words a night. Benny was the guy Dominic paid to stand by the door and look intimidating. "You look like you've seen a ghost, boss," Benny said. His voice was different. Gone was the rough, street slang mumble. In its place was a crisp, articulate, and chillingly calm tone. You're the Shadow?" Dominic asked, his mind reeling as he tried to recontextualize the last 5 years of his life. "You've been playing me this whole time?" "I'm not the Shadow," Benny corrected, stepping over a moaning guard to retrieve a fallen magazine. "The Shadow isn't a person, Dominic. It's a role. A fail-safe installed by the Commission in New York to monitor the Midwest families. I'm just the current operator." Benny looked at Isabella, offering her a curt nod of respect. "And I haven't been playing you. I've been auditing you." "Auditing me?" Dominic stepped forward, anger flushing his face. "My uncle just tried to execute us, and you're talking about an audit?" "The Commission suspected Vincent was rotting the organization from the inside," Benny explained, checking his watch. "We knew he was skimming. We knew he was courting the cartel. But Vincent was a made man of the old guard. We couldn't touch him without absolute proof of treason. If we moved too early, it would have started a civil war between the 5 families." Benny gestured to Isabella. "That's why I needed the girl. And you." You were the perfect bait to make Vincent panic. When he felt the walls closing in, I knew he would try to liquidate the loose ends personally. I just had to wait for him to pick up the gun. You waited? Isabella stepped out from behind Dominic, her eyes flashing with disbelief. You jammed his gun. You were on the roof. You watched him put a pistol to my head and pull the trigger. Calculated risk, Benny said coldly. I sabotaged the firing pin on that weapon myself 2 days ago. I knew it wouldn't fire, but I needed him to try. Attempted murder of a Don and a civilian heir? That seals his death warrant. The commission is satisfied. You used us as pawns, Dominic spat. I kept you alive, Benny countered, his voice hard. I tipped off the police to the alleyway to scare Kruger off. I left the back door of the textile factory unlocked. I've been cleaning up your messes for 3 years, Dominic. You're a good leader, but you're too emotional. Benny walked toward the window, clipping a carabiner onto his rappel line. The police will be here in exactly 4 minutes. I have an extraction team 2 floors up. My job here is done. The report is already filed. Where is he? Dominic demanded, looking around the room. Benny pointed a gloved finger toward the service exit. He crawled. I left him for you. Consider it a severance package. Benny paused at the window ledge. The wind whipped his tactical gear. Handle your family business, Dominic, but make it quick. The next time we meet, it will be strictly professional. With that, Benny leaned back and vanished into the grey skyline, leaving them alone with the wreckage. Dominic turned toward the service exit. A trail of blood smeared the expensive carpet. Following it, they found Vincent Moretti. The old man had collapsed near the door. His pristine white suit was ruined, stained red from the impact of the rappel line kick that had cracked his ribs. He was wheezing, clutching his chest. He didn't look like a mastermind anymore. He didn't look like the terrifying patriarch who had ordered the death of the Rossi family. He looked like a broken, pathetic old man. Vincent looked up, his eyes glassy. When he saw Dominic, a flicker of the old arrogance returned. "Dominic!" Vincent gasped, blood flecking his lips. "Help me up. We can fix this." Dominic stared down at him, his face a mask of stone. "Fix this? You framed Carlo Rossi. You killed Isabella's mother by bankrupting her. You tried to kill me. There is no fixing this." "Think about the money," Vincent pleaded, his voice rising in desperation. "The $5 million is peanuts, nephew. The cartel deal, it's worth billions. We can rule Chicago, not just the streets, the politicians, the judges. We can be gods." "You don't get it, do you?" Dominic said softly. "I don't want to be a god of a graveyard. I wanted a family. You destroyed that." "You're weak," Vincent spat, showing his teeth. "Just like your father. He didn't have the stomach for the real work either. That's why I had to do it. That's why I had to take the reins." Dominic stiffened. The confirmation of his father's murder hung in the air like a toxic cloud. He reached into Vincent's shoulder holster and pulled out the heavy, chrome-plated revolver. The backup piece Vincent hadn't had time to draw. Dominic checked the cylinder. It was fully loaded. He turned to Isabella. "Isabella, come here." She walked to his side, her steps slow. She looked down at the man who was the architect of every tragedy in her life. "He owes you a debt," Dominic said, his voice low and serious. He held the revolver out to her, handle first. "A life for a life. It is the oldest law of the street. He killed your father. He killed your mother. He tried to kill you. Justice belongs to you." Isabella looked at the gun. It was heavy, cold, and ugly. Her hand trembled as she reached out and took it. The metal felt foreign against her skin. She was a doctor. Her hands were trained to stitch, to mend, to heal, to feel a pulse, not to stop one. She raised the weapon. She aimed it squarely at Vincent's heart. Vincent squeezed his eyes shut, bracing for the darkness. "Do it!" he screamed. "Do it, you little brat!" The room went silent. The only sound was the wind howling outside and the distant wail of sirens getting closer. Isabella's finger tightened on the trigger. She imagined her father's face. She imagined the cold nights her mother spent in the charity ward. The anger boiled up inside her, hot and righteous. It would be so easy. Just one squeeze, and the nightmare ends. But then she looked at Dominic. He wasn't watching Vincent. He was watching her. His eyes were filled with a profound sadness, but also a deep respect. He wasn't forcing her. He was giving her the agency she had been denied for years. If she pulled this trigger, she crossed a line. She entered his world. She became a killer. Isabella's breath hitched. Her hand stopped shaking. She made her choice. She shifted her aim 6 inches to the left. Bang! The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. The bullet slammed into the floorboards next to Vincent's ear, sending a spray of wood splinters into his face. Vincent flinched violently, letting out a shameful shriek of terror. He scrambled backward, hyperventilating, checking himself for holes. "I missed," Isabella whispered. She lowered the gun. She turned to Dominic, her green eyes clear and defiant. "I am not you, Vincent," she said, her voice gaining strength. "I am not a butcher. I am a healer, and I will not let you turn me into a monster just to balance a ledger." She pressed the revolver back into Dominic's chest. "But," she added, looking at Dominic, "I won't stop him from being who he is." Dominic took the gun. He nodded slowly. A wave of relief washed over him, relief that she hadn't shattered her soul on his account. She had passed a test he hadn't even meant to give her. She was stronger than him. She was pure. "Go," Dominic told her gently. "Wait by the elevator." Isabella walked away, not looking back. Dominic turned to his uncle. The softness vanished from his eyes. The wolf returned. "Goodbye, Uncle," Dominic said flatly. Vincent opened his mouth to beg, to bribe, to lie. Dominic didn't let him speak. Bang! One shot. Clean. Final. The echo of the gunshot rang out like a bell tolling for the old regime. The reign of Vincent Moretti was over. Dominic stood over the body for a moment, feeling the weight of the crown settle onto his shoulders. It was heavy, but for the first time, he wasn't carrying it alone. 6 months later, the snow had melted, replaced by the humid warmth of a Chicago June. The Rossi Community Clinic was buzzing with activity. It was a state-of-the-art facility in the heart of the West Side, the neighborhood that had been neglected for decades. It was funded by an anonymous donation of $5 million. Dr. Isabella Rossi finished stitching up a kid who had fallen off his skateboard. "You're good to go, Leo," she smiled, handing him a lollipop. "Stay off the rails for a week." "Thanks, Doc." As the boy ran out, the bell above the door chimed. Isabella looked up. Her breath hitched. Dominic Moretti stood there. He looked different. The stress lines around his eyes had softened. He wore a suit, but he didn't look like a thug. He looked like a king. He was officially the Don of Chicago now, sanctioned by the commission. The streets were quiet. The drugs were gone. He was running a clean ship. Gambling, unions, construction. No blood. "We're closing, sir," Isabella said, a playful smirk touching her lips. "Unless you have a medical emergency." Dominic walked to the reception desk. He placed a coffee cup on the counter. "Black, no sugar, and definitely no battery acid," he said. Isabella laughed. It was a sound that filled the room, bright and free. "I see your taste has improved." "My taste has always been excellent," Dominic said, his eyes scanning her face, lingering on her lips. I just had to wait for the right time to indulge it. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He placed it on the counter. "What is this?" Isabella asked. "Interest," Dominic said, "on the loan you gave me." "I didn't give you a loan. You gave me a second chance," Dominic said, his voice dropping to that low rumble that still made her knees weak. "You saved my life in that cabin. You saved my soul in that office." Isabella opened the box. Inside wasn't a diamond ring. It was an old, rusted key. "The cabin," Dominic explained. "I bought the land. I renovated it. It's not a hideout anymore. It's a home. It's in your name." Isabella looked up at him, tears stinging her eyes. "Dominic, I can't be part of your world. You know that." "I know," Dominic said. He reached across the counter and took her hand. "That's why I changed the world to fit you. The illegal ops are shut down. Benny and the Commission, we have an understanding. I run Chicago the right way. No more wars." He leaned in close. "I'm not asking you to be a mob wife, Isabella. I'm asking you to be my partner. You heal them. I protect them. We run this city together. Fire and ice." Isabella looked at the key. Then she looked at the man who had walked into a diner at 2 a.m. and changed her destiny. She picked up the coffee cup he had brought her. She took a sip. It was perfect. "Pick me up at 8, she said, her green eyes flashing. "And bring the Maserati. I want to drive." Dominic grinned, the first true, unburdened smile she had ever seen on him. "Yes, ma'am." He turned and walked out into the sunlight. Isabella watched him go, knowing that for the first time in the history of Chicago, the wolf hadn't eaten the lamb. The wolf had fallen in love with her, and together, they were going to be unstoppable. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of how a simple joke in a diner toppled an empire. Dominic and Isabella proved that power isn't just about guns and money. It's about loyalty, trust, and the courage to stand your ground when the whole world is against you. What did you think of the twist with Benny? Did you see it coming, or did you think he was just muscle? And let's be honest, did Isabella make the right choice by sparing Vincent and letting Dominic pull the trigger? If you enjoyed The Waitress and the Wolf, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more stories like this. If you were Isabella, would you have taken the money and run, or would you have stayed for the wolf? Type run or stay in the comments right now. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a upload. I have a new thriller coming next week that involves a private jet, a stolen diamond, and a bodyguard who knows too much. You won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching, listening. Stay safe, stay sharp, and I'll see you in the next story.